Good afternoon. This is Professor Aminal Dean with Critical Talk. And today, out of all the subjects that we have covered, we haven't thoroughly covered the other end and put it on with the top end. We've done higher education, and now it's time for us to blend the two. And it becomes, what about education? Most of the talk nowadays either about COVID or the election. So we're going to delve into something that is equally important, and that is education. Lots of questions are roaming. What is the relationship between school and social justice? What are the human issues? What is the purpose of K through 12? Should classrooms connect with current events? And how should they do that to get the best outcome? Because that's where any massive social change is going to come from, and that's in the young people. How are we going to promote critical literacy? What are the roles of social media? What's new that I should add to what I teach? Loads of questions, and I have a fantastic panel with me today. Let me first introduce Amina Mitchell. Is a doctoral candidate at the University of Illinois at Chicago in the Department of Educational Psychology. Sorry about that. She hails from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for those of you who don't know where one of the battleground states is, where she completed a Bachelor of Science at Duquesne University. She was a long-term substitute teacher in several schools, and then taught high school English and speech communication in Gary, Indiana for 8 years. Our second guest is Noor Jabri, who graduated from the University of Chicago with a master's degree in urban education. You all got to tell me about all these different divisions in education. Anyway, she currently teaches middle school science in Chicago public schools. She is passionate about equity in education for all students, ensuring that we take and raise a good, solid generation of kids that are creative and civically engaged. She is an active member of the Chicago Teachers Union. Oh, I got lots of questions about them. And the union representative at her school. She is also involved in community organizations and programs such as Coffee Talks. Thirdly, we have Fran Allen, who was and is an educator with the Chicago Public Schools. I just realized I got two science teachers, so I'm going to really whip you all. Before she retired, she was the science teacher at Mark T. Skinner Public Schools. She holds a Bachelor of Science and a Master's of Science in Education. Mrs. Allen has received numerous awards. Among them is the Teacher of the Year, bestowed on her by the Chicago Academy of Science, and a Fulbright Scholarship to study in Japan. She is interested in politics and travel. Welcome, ladies, to Critical Talk.
Thank you.
Needless to say, I have lots to say. And I want to start, and I couldn't decide where to start, because we have just so many darn issues. We left school, folks left school last Christmas, I guess, for some, and Thanksgiving for others, feeling good or bad, depending, or waiting for the grades to come in, which was going to determine the temperature of their emotions. But K through 12 folks were assured of, just returning to school, perhaps for some, maybe having a new teacher. What they didn't anticipate was returning to school. And then just as they got their ducks in a row, they were yanked out of school. So I would like for you to give your best impression of the 12-year-older to which that happened. And the teacher who had prepared all of these lesson plans, only to find out, oh my God, I got to change this, I got to change that, I got to regroup. What the hell am I going to use? Talk to me. Amina Mitchell.
Yes, ma'am. I think that one thing that on the high school level is that they had just come out of, for many of them, they had just come out of exams. And the semester was rolling, the fall semester, the first semester of the year was rolling to an end, and the second semester was revving up.
Yeah.
So that's where, and then it kind of all broke down from there. Teacher conferences, getting report cards, all of that came around the time that the pandemic came too. So
what did you think, Nora?
Yeah, so I think when we came back, everyone was expecting a normal school year because I'd been getting ready to see each other. When we first went out, I really remember because my assistant principal asked me, "Are we coming back?" Now, I'm the science teacher, so they expect me to know how viruses work and make their predictions, right? They're like, "Who do you think is going to happen?" So we're like, "No, we'll be back." The first couple of weeks, the kids were like, "Yes, school's out."
I
Teachers
know,
like, we can breathe,
like
you know,
early
management.
Yeah.
And then, slowly, I think the kids began to see the challenges, teachers began to see the challenges, engaging the students began to become such a challenge. Teachers were now having to adapt at a very fast pace with no guidelines. At the time, CPS was sending out mixed messages. So very quickly, what everybody thought was going to be like, okay, we're going to be back in 2 weeks. Everybody's just an extra extended winter break. Very quickly spiraled into how do we regroup? How do we actually teach? This is, maybe now it's till the end of the year. So it was a lot of mixed emotions, I would say, on both the staff side and the student side.
Fran?
Well, being a substitute teacher for, over 5 years, I've gotten to know several schools. And I would get phone calls when this first started, and they say, "Fran, I don't think the science teacher's coming back. Do you think you could?" And I said, no, I don't think I could do this, And they'd say, "Well, physics." I said, "Oh, I definitely can't do that." So it was, and the kids were like, "Are you going to be our teacher? Mrs. So-and-so's going to have a baby." I said, "Look, sweetheart, it's up to your principal and, the powers that be, whether or not I'll be here. But I plan to do what I can if I am in this classroom." And I have to agree with the other ladies. This was really, really hard. A lot of the teachers were using the Chromebooks to help the students. And it was, in many cases, a disaster because they said, "Well, my kids don't have books. They can't take the books home." It was really very, very traumatic.
I did not think about the fact that students had to leave books at school. Or would have left books at school because teachers and apparently thought they were coming right back. So, but that's nice against the definition of pandemic. Pandemic means it's not going to be over the next day. Pandemic kind of means widespread, long,
nobody got the memo.
full of death, chaos. So how did everybody miss pandemic?
Because the memo said we'll be back. It's only going to take a little time. And we all believed it or hoped it. And so we based decisions about how to proceed based on the idea that it was short term.
Okay.
And I think
In the history of the world, there's never been a short-term pandemic. Nor
I think for we laymen, pandemic was a new word.
that's in the
And we have
dictionary.
never experienced pandemic in the United States. We've
Can you speak
experienced
up
the
just a
word
little
all
bit?
over the world, but not in our home territory. And that
Frana,
was
can you
the
speak
wake
up?
up.
Frana, can you speak up? We can barely hear you.
Okay, pandemic was known for foreign countries, any country outside of the United States, but not in the United States. This was a shock to the system.
But we had SARS, we had H1N1, we had MRSA, we had a huge pandemic that killed millions in the beginning of the 20th century. I mean, maybe you're talking about, well, even recently we had H1N1.
But it wasn't as a wide a scale as this pandemic is, because it has affected everyone. They started out saying that the pandemic in the United States would affect only senior citizens. Then they said, oh, no, don't wear a mask, the whole 9 yards. This was a big mistake. And I guess we as educators we did not really pay attention to the.
So you all couldn't, well, at first it seems like you could present a calm face to students. Even though it's a pandemic, it'll be over next week.
Well, that's what everybody, that's what the news said, it would be over. And the president said it would be over in a couple of weeks.
But if we have a president where nobody's ever, I mean, after the first line out of his mouth when he was first running for office, we haven't believed anything. So I would have to wonder about people who would believe him on this issue. But with regard to education, I see Noor with her books and her whiteboard and all of this stuff behind her. I have never had, and I have to confess, had to write a lesson plan in my life. So I have a vague notion. I think I might have seen one once. But I know that teachers use them to make sure that they're teaching what they intend. Okay. And because it's face to face, the things that people use are in the classroom, especially for you science teachers. They're pretty much in the classroom. Now you have to be creative, and it's after you have your oh my God moment. What did you use? What did you think about? How did you set up? Did you throw your lesson plan in the trash and make a new one? What did you do?
Yeah, I think in the first wave, like last year, it was very much how to keep students engaged. So I don't want to say I threw out my lessons plans, but now all of a sudden you had to entertain an audience that wasn't forced to be there. So my lesson plans became very different. They had to be geared to what students wanted. And more than ever, it had to be what they were interested in, what they want to talk about. So we did talk about Corona. But for example, I was teaching physical science, right? So I had to find ways to discuss coronavirus because that was so important to them while still hitting, the physical science topics they would have to cover. So I think it was just like taking creativity and student engagement and interest, like because my students were choosing to log in for the first time, I think right after COVID. I wouldn't say now, but even now to a certain extent, students, if they were logging in, it was a choice they were making. So you wanted to like get them to buy into the idea that they should tune into your class, you know?
Well, that's a hell of a choice, Amina Mitchell, for a 12-year-old. I get to choose whether I want to come to class or not, or I'm 9 years old and I get to choose. I might decide I want to go watch, what is his name? SpongeBob SquarePants.
Not 12-year-olds.
Well, you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Well, I think that in the spring, I noticed that attendance was not mandatorily recorded. It was more or less that where, you know, everything was kind of put in neutral. So your grades don't necessarily count. We're just saying whether you did them or you were there or you got something from it. You didn't have to check in or make sure that you checked in by a certain time. I think a lot of it again had to do with the idea that we're just going to try to weather this out, get to the end of the school year. So, and then by the time the fall came, everything will be back to normal and we'll be back class in session.
Don't you think, Hannah, that teachers have a responsibility and an accountability, whether it's bad times or good times, to keep a discipline, even in refugee camps and all of these camps, the teachers keep an order. So if the pandemic lasted 2 weeks or 142 weeks, the order and the discipline that you're instilling in kids should still go on.
Well, the discipline that you're instilling is usually occurs face to face rather than via a Zoom meeting, where you're just as clueless as they are.
Fran,
So
your comments.
My comments are the same. This is so different. And this, if the students did not have the discipline in the classroom, how were they going to have the discipline to get in front of a monitor and listen to you talk when they had the freedom of perhaps their parents being out of their sight or at work if they're fortunate enough? And all of a sudden, you know, they said, shoot, I don't have to listen to anybody. I'm gone. Let me just leave it on. You know, let me watch SpongeBob, Blue Pants or Green Pants, whatever it is. It's very different nowadays. There are too many things that the kids are distracted with. And as Nora said, you really are on stage. You are on stage every time you turn on that monitor and those kids look at you. You have to bring them into the fold.
Well, this is what
am I correct? I mean, does that sound about right?
We will, and while Frana adjusts her microphone so we can hear her better, we're going to take a quick break for a minute or so, maybe a little bit more, and I want to come back to that point specifically. Teachers, how do you train parents to assist you? Teachers, what have you found creatively to put there so that kids want to pay attention to you while you're on stage? We'll be back in just a moment. This is Professor Amina Al-Din with Critical Talk. And what about education?
popping up all over the country with an
Our neighbors don't
eye-catching
realize
message.
that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No me! No justice! No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world? You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward. That lesson learned have brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
This is Professor Amanal Dean, and we're back with Critical Talk, talking about what about education. Lastly, we had Frana put something in there about you're on stage. You know, as a university professor, every time I enter into a classroom, I'm on stage. So for university professors, the technology may or may not have been challenging. We've been using remote learning for more than a decade. But folks still had to think about what to do in this particular circumstance, nor what about creativity? How do you get the student? I'm tickled by the fact that I could ever think of a student not wanting to tune into my class. But tell me about it.
Yeah, I think what makes this this young generation very interesting is that they are very attuned to the purpose of school, right? They no longer see it linearly like we did. You go to middle school, high school, college, job, right? They understand that there are diverse avenues to getting a career and to making money. And so the goal of the classroom, when students were no longer mandated to be physically in the building in front of me listening, was to really find what did they need to know, or what did they want to know to feel like they were growing, right? Like I could talk to them about cells and membranes and atoms and protons, but was that what they really want to know? Do they find that useful? Do they see that linear line that we used to see growing up? And the answer is no, they no longer see it that way. So it was very much engaging students about questioning the world around them. How does their world work? Why does it work the way it does? I would take them, take my laptop with me, hotspot myself, walk outside and do a demonstration. Or, kids wanted to know about finance. So how could I weave science into finance? Maybe talk about engineering, or talk about job opportunities regarding these science fields, right? And that is how I attempted to. And even today, I just literally yesterday, I had a student, I was like, hey, so-and-so, can you please respond to the poll I just posted? Let me know what you think. And they're like, no, Ms. Jabri, I don't really care. Can you this is not going to help me. Can we talk about finances? I'm like, you know what? If we get through this Friday, I'll leave it open discussion to talk about.
Did you remind them that you're the science teacher, not the economics teacher?
I think you want to listen to students. The number one thing students value is that you hear their voice. I think growing up, it wasn't as big of a deal. Now it's so prominent. They want to be heard. So it's onto the teachers to listen to them and incorporate everything.
Let me push back.
Sure.
Are teachers following a trend that may not be helpful for young people as they grow into adults and have to do many things and have to have professions and careers? We could have, a trend of just about anything. And if everybody follows them, instead of giving them the content and all the other things that they need, they're kind of left flapping in the wind.
Yeah.
And it was nice that you heard me with my dumb butt.
No. So I will point out two things. I think this is what makes a teacher's job more challenging this year. And in general recently is we do have to do twofold. You do have to provide the rigorous content, right, that we got when we were growing up. They do have to know it. I do not excuse my students from knowing it. But at the same time, I have to take it to another level and be creative. I can't just do textbook stuff anymore. So I will always find ways to weave things in, right? Like they need to understand, for example, how a water molecule works. Well, that's not relevant to them. What I can make it relevant, for example, is by getting them to understand how water is a main valuable source in the world today, how we're running out of water and how there are corporations making money off of this process. And then I get them to understand that, like, look, there's a career opportunity in this. And now kids are listening, right?
So are you bringing in YouTube video? Let me ask Frana, we can only see half of your face, and please be still. This is not a where you can turn.
I'm a kid.
I know.
This is how they act.
But you know, I will dock you.
Everything, and you can't.
And I don't want you to look at all those things. Are you using social media, YouTube, video? Amina Mitchell, what are some of the things that because one of the things that students are missing during this time is sports, music. I don't know. I guess health classes are going on. All of the attend. What do we say? I'll call them attending arts. Amina.
Yes. What your first question, which is that what do you do to engage students? There's a difference in how you teach person to person or face to face as compared to online. And I think that is what is kind of flipped us topsy-turvy, because when you make those lesson plans, you not only talk about the objectives, but it's the strategies and the materials, and how are you going to meet your objective in the classroom. And doing it online is a lot different than doing it in person. When you're online, you've got it's not as easy just to say, okay, I'm going to show you this, or I'm going to give you, or turn to page, or that that is what you might do if you were face to face with the student. But when you're a two-dimensional figure on a computer screen,
Three-dimensional,
two-dimensional, it's a lot different. You can't pass out that piece of paper. You don't know when they're paying attention. You don't know if they're playing a game on their phone, because you can't see all of them. You don't know what's going on in the background. You don't know what's going on at all with 25 to 35 different environments that are affecting the students. So that's a big difference than when you're all sitting in the same classroom.
Well, if I had to ask you all to vote, which would you prefer? Hybrid, totally remote, or in person with risk?
In person with the enough PPE, the room to be hermetically sealed.
No, that's no difference than being on a damn computer. I'm gonna walk into the room and there's a space cadet standing or walking around, and she can touch me, but I'm looking at her and I'm still in shock. Noor, your choice. Hermetically sealed, in person? What else?
I would go with hybrid. The a few days of face-to-face or person-to-person instruction, and send them out with assignments that you can help them do over the internet.
Okay. So you're willing to run the risk. Nor.
Yeah, see, I would, remote, and I'll tell you why. If there is even a 1% chance risk that my student being in the classroom, or 0.01% that my student being in the classroom is going to cause a grandparent, an aunt, or an uncle to get sick, I can't have my student living with that on their conscience. But because they chose to come to school, X, Y, and Z happened. And this has happened before to a friend of mine. She went out, she did her thing, went to school. Her dad got sick with COVID. She tested positive first. 4 days later, he tested positive.
Mm.
And he passed away. And she lives with that.
Wow.
But let me ask all of you. I don't know if I have an opinion as a retired professor who doesn't have to even think about it. But let me ask you this. What about child development? Frana, who's 106, can't sit still in the damn chair on the schoolyard.
Because, and I'll give you a little history. Because I taught elementary science from kindergarten to 8th grade, and I was the only science teacher, I was moving constantly. I am a person who gets up at 4:30 in the morning. I read. I mean, I'm walking the dog. I'm doing
But
stuff.
see, all of that is
That's my makeup. That's in my DNA.
oh wait, yeah, well it is now after 106 years. But meanwhile, what about child development? What I hear from Noor is now I'm gonna pretend I am the new teacher on the block. I'm being asked to, I got to wait for you to tell me what you want me to teach you. That's for me, that's crazy. Two, what about child development? When are they going to learn even the discipline that Frana has with getting up at 4:30 in the morning and doing this and doing that and doing the other and getting to critical thinking, because all of education is not about just what you want to learn. Nina Mitchell, let's go. Come on, ladies, wake up.
Yeah, so and I think to address this, and I think you're right. I think there is a solution, honestly. And I think when you mentioned that, would you go back to school? You said with a risk. I think if our society and our government genuinely cared about development, because I'll tell you, I have some diverse learners. I have ELL students who I am working very hard to allow them to access the information, but they cannot because you're not there to show. So there is a solution, but that requires a government, a society, and a community that cares enough to put money into education. It is doable. Put 10 students in a classroom, provide enough space, hire more people, right? You can do it. And if you genuinely cared about the continuous development of students without that year lag, or maybe 2 years, who knows at this point, then you would need to put money into it. But I think putting that on the teacher or on the student and saying you need to take that risk so that you can develop properly, it's like I'm not developing anyways when I have to go through a trauma like this where it's my fault somebody did. It doesn't matter what.
You bring up some additional questions, but what about the parents of young kindergarten? I think I hear an echo and I don't know where it's coming from. What about the parents who kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth grade, who kept their students at home? They're not teachers. Where does the development happen?
And again, I agree with you. This is a big problem because you're going to have socioeconomic, role play even bigger gaps. Parents who can't afford in-person tutors or whatnot will be able to provide that for the stay-at-home moms will be able to provide that. But the solution is not send everybody back to school. The solution is put more money into education. Yes, get those kindergartners back in the classroom with their teacher with a ratio of 1 to 6, 1 to 8, where it is 6, right? But kindergartners can carry COVID and do bring it back home. Again, I know another situation for first grader because they're hybrid. Got COVID, got it back home.
Yeah.
So, it is doable if people want to do it.
If they want to invest, Nora,
Exactly.
if they want to invest. And we're not just talking about education, the Educational Board of Education. We're talking about corporations. We're talking about businesses that give parents jobs that will allow parents to be involved in their children's education. This is not happening. And when I think of, the new math, these parents in first and second grade, they said, well, look, the way I learned it was 1 and 1 was 2. I don't care why it was 2. I just need you to put down 1 plus 1 is 2. It's very different. We haven't educated our parents. Our parents are still back in the dark ages.
Well, I want to say, as far as development of children, they're going to develop whether they're in school or they're not in school. They will develop. School is designed to enhance that development, to sometimes to further the spots where a child may be weak, keep strong the other parts that are strong. And then there's the, social development, psychological development, physical development, social development. So there's a lot of developing going on inside of a child.
But how are you going to keep that up or enhance it when they're not in school? How are they just by fiat going to understand relationships?
This is where the parents and the teacher go hand in hand.
It's a collaboration.
They have to work absolute collaboration. And if you don't have that collaboration or that relationship, it's not going to progress as quickly as one would like it to. And as you said, Amina, that it is imperative that we collaborate, teacher to teacher, teacher to parent. And it's also important that the parents get some sort of feedback from the teacher about their child. But it's very hard.
And I think a lot of parents are coming to the realization of just what their kids were doing inside of school every day. For some parents, it's been a revelation where they thought, the teacher just does this or that. They realized that taking care of their children is more than just a little this and a little that.
More than a notion. Well, I want to stop there. I have a couple of more areas I want to hit, and we'll be back after a moment or two with a little break. This is Professor Amina Al-Din, and today on Critical Talk, we are talking about education. We'll be right back.
Assalamu alaikum!
I love Adam's World because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adam's World because it makes me happy. Watch No. 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 And here's Adam and here's Anissa. Adam is and his sister. Adam is a boy and he is really smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
This is Professor Amina Al-Din hosting Critical Talk with three wonderful conversants, Amina Mitchell, Noor Jabri, and Fran Allen. We've talked about a lot of things, and I guess we need to get to some specifics. Even as a college professor, because you all didn't do your job, I had to keep students damn near entertained. So I used to fret a lot about, well, what did they learn in high school? What did they learn in middle school? Are they learning anything about discipline? Then I gave that up. And I started doing things like spending a few hours on the weekend pasting clips together of stuff that I knew was going to hit them in the gut, right? To discuss whatever it was. But here we are. This is the end of October. Teachers are still fretting. And I'm not a parent. Well, I am a parent, but as a grandparent, I'm getting a little tired of teachers. I'm trying to think of a phrase that is not the crude phrase of complaining.
Well, the first thing I want to say is I think you're giving teachers more credit than we deserve as far as how your students acted in class.
I don't need to hear that.
Meaning entertained.
No.
I think that I'm blaming it on the media and TV and all of those good things and commercials, 1 minute, 2 minute flashes of everything.
But then there, in watching TV and the young lady that thinks she can figure out how COVID works and has some solutions. This kid is not in high school, and she's got a poster board that's winning awards. So are we creating even more so class divisions, access to education divisions, what the average home must have divisions as we weather our way through this, pandemic, which lasts until it finishes?
I think, in my opinion on this, is people are putting a lot of weight on this teachers. They want teachers to fix everything. They want teachers to fix a kid's behavior. They want them to fix their trauma. They want them to fix their reading and writing and math, their reading comprehension, their analysis of the world, their relationships, how to talk to people, how to socialize. That is a lot to put on one individual that sees the student. I mean, I see my students for an hour a day, let's just say about an hour a day. And assuming they don't have a lot of environmental factors. And I think this is where I think what was good about, not good, but I guess the silver lining about kids being quarantined is that it takes a village to create the person you want to create. Aunts and uncles and grandparents have had to step up. Parents have had to step up. Siblings have had to step up. We might actually get students who are better off, right? Who are more adaptive, who are more responsive and critical thinking and socially engaged, because they've had so many more characters play a role in their life. Because they're not.
So that might be a win-win in one sense. In one sense for the family, if you have those other people who maintain a schedule of engagement with you. Fran, I saw you nodding your head. Can't hear you. While she's correct, there you go.
Parents have to engage with their kids. I think parents for the first time really saw their kid for what they have raised. Good, bad, or indifferent. Seen their child in full,
Yeah.
without the debit card to go to McDonald's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, wondering why their kids' health is so poor. Parents haven't cooked. Nora, you're right. They think of us as social workers, as doctors, as psychologists, psychiatrists. We don't mind helping out, but they have to participate as well. They have to sit down, they have to talk to their child without the technology in their hand.
Well, I would agree that they've seen their kids in full bloom and wondering, oh my God, what have I created here? In some instances, and in other instances,
Some
smiling.
instances, because parents also are praying that school will open so that their kid can go back to school
And
so
get
they
out
don't
from
have
under
to
them.
involve. And one of the things that the Board of Education said, they wanted to send special education students back to school because the parents were just, in such denial that their kid was doing so poorly. And I'm talking about the ADHD kid, the ADD kid who goes to these classes like Nora's science class, like Amina's English class, where they need to have someone to help them focus. How can you do that online?
Well, let me go back to my question. Are we then opening a door for government to say, some of these young people don't need to be necessarily in regular classrooms and places as we know them? Don't we need to contain and quarter them in other places because their needs are different? What they're going to be, I'm just forecasting. And if you got kids who need medicine just to be able to act quote unquote normal, you got other kids who have a myriad of birth defects. Why are they all in the same classroom with kids who are able to learn?
Wasn't there a case that the Board of Education had to pay a family because they denied their child the proper education, quote unquote, and all the child could do was watch paint dry? I mean, literally. I mean, every parent wants the best for their kid, but you're right, Amina. You're absolutely correct. Some kids don't belong in a classroom, but I think all kids deserve hope. I think we have to find out
why don't teachers figure out what it is before the government steps in and decides what it's going to be? Because every parent and everybody in their family thinks their kid is a genius. So the kid shows up with later on in life with severe learning disabilities, not necessarily jumping around like Fran or the other stuff, but that this kid is not bright. This kid is an average kid, which most of them are, who needs to be a good, average, well-seated, confident person.
I think teachers have figured it out. And teachers have been saying it for a long time. We've been saying we need social workers, we need counselors, we need teachers' aides. We figured it out. The solution is not saying so-and-so kid cannot join. The solution is saying, let's give this kid the resources and the tools you need in the classrooms. Teachers have been saying it. We know the answer. We need teachers' aid. We need bilingual translators. We need one-on-one aides. We need parent involvement in the building, which a lot of schools do get. We have the answers. We need students should have access to, multiple devices, like not multiple devices, but multiple resources. Like if you need a tablet to translate, you have that. If you're, some students are not good with writing. So if you need to type, like Google, Microsoft, Apple, all big tech companies have now stepped up and said, we're donating 3,000 computers. They've profited insanely out of this. So I think
what you're saying,
know the answer.
but you're still you're asking for things like we live in a society where nobody has to pay for all of this. I get outraged when my tax dollars go to the teachers union, who I think sucks, or which go to support that thing they call a school in the next block from me, which looks like it should be, just razed to the ground. And I'm scared for the kids going in there that something bad is going to happen. But I'm being taxed to death now. If you need all of that to teach a child, where did I draw the line? There has to be some fiscal responsibility.
No,
I got bad
the money is there. They only take like 2-3% of our taxes towards education. It's such a small amount. They need
the teachers union is asking for more money.
That's what
there's money.
Chicago has money. The part
Chicago has money, Dr. McLeod. They have money. They just put it on things that don't necessarily returns properly. They don't invest in the right locations. The money is there.
I agree with you, Nora.
Well, then what?
Also, schools need to make sure that the kids are able to do certain things. They need to be exposed. They need to be exposed to auto mechanics. They need to be exposed to cooking. And they need the exposure to the new world, because guess what? Automation is here.
Okay, well, if we took all of that into consideration, and we're always talking about the kids in need, what about the kids who can't succeed without all of that? Nobody is investing in them.
They can't succeed mainly because they haven't been exposed to find out what they can succeed in. You go to school and you're learning biology, you're learning math, trigonometry and stuff, and they're saying, why in the heck am I learning that? I'm good with my hands. I want to do something in art. Teach them how to build a house. Teach them.
But when you have access to YouTube, you have for those who've been asked to teach physics. I majored in physics, so this is hilarious. But you have a Black physicist who has made videos for kids. You have Black and others who have made videos in genetics. They've made all kind. You got a world of videos to use for when you want to show a kid what learning this today can lead to. It's not. It's exposure is not a question today. It might have been a question yesterday, because you can expose them in a different way now. So things that the average teacher in a classroom may not have had access to.
Very true.
They do have access, but I always worry about the kids. I learned this in teaching. The mantra is to teach to the I don't want to learn, I got behavioral issues. I got perhaps chemical issues. I've got this, I've got the other. Well, what about the kid who can just learn? They get left out of the equation.
They do.
Nobody focuses on them.
You're right. And that's what happens when we ask for smaller class sizes. When I have 35 kids, everything from I can't read to I'm reading at a 12th grade level, how do you cater to that? And that's the struggle teachers deal with and work very hard at. Like, that's why I said I try to diversify for my kids. And you'll have some who, you know, they'll pick up what they can, and some kids who will really go on and excel. I've had numerous kids email me saying, like, you know what, thank you for doing this. Thank you for showing me this. Now I'm reading more about this, right? Like, or now I understand. So you're right. And that's the teacher's job, is to cater to, you know, to differentiate.
Both ends. Both
ends. Reading to everybody who is, you know, very well advanced.
And inevitably, and last comment, inevitably, teachers are drawn to the I can't do.
I think it's not the I can't do as much as it is the disengaged student. So you're trying to engage all the students in the learning process. So those who are already there, you're hoping they'll stay, but you're trying to gather as many as you can into that process.
Start to change them. Ladies, it's been great. Hopefully we'll get together again, because education will always be on that list of things that we must concern ourselves with. This is Professor Amina Al-Din on Critical Talk. I have been chatting away with Amina Mitchell, Fran Allen, and Noor Jabri, and I would invite all of you to come back and spend some more time with me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And
I'll
for having us as well. Take care.
You.